Good evening, ghouls and fiends. Welcome once again to another edition of the Ministry of Horror on twitch.tv/Tesius. I am your host, as per usual, Tez, and this isn't Friday, where we normally do the show. No. Slightly different change up this week only in the schedule. I'm away Friday night, so that is why we're going out live this evening. It's also not going to be a super long episode. One, because this is a Thursday, not a Friday, so I don't want to go to bed silly late. I don't want to go to bed too late. But also, I haven't really at all had the opportunity to watch any new horror films, so we don't have any reviews this week. This week is purely going to be the news, and then we are going to take a look at the beloved horror franchise, horror series, Phantasm. Don Coscarelli. I may have got that wrong. I'll see later on when we get to it. But we'll be talking about the Phantasm series. Vix is in the chat. Hey Vix, 2 Tez podcasts in 1 week. Aren't we spoilt? Well, Vix, last year, my goodness, 2 was a quiet week. I did Ministry of Slam every Sunday, Ministry of Horror every Friday, and then a gaming stream at least once a week. No wonder I felt burnout by the end of that year, and I'm taking a much more relaxed approach to streaming now. But it was all in good fun. And that does lead me on to my first little tidbit before we get into just the general show. You know, this is the opening of the show. We a little bit of a chat. I plug the show and the avenues that you can check us out. But yes, on Tuesday, the 1st of August, 2nd, 1st, yes, 1st. I'm all kerfuddled because it feels like a Friday. It's not. Because of this being a Thursday, it was actually on Tuesday, the formerly known as Ministry of Slam, but now the Wrestling Arena, returned for its first live podcast show of the year. Ads have started again on the show. Wait a second. Hold fire while I turn that shit off, because I know that can be a pain. There we go. Yes, so Paul Bericles has been keeping the show alive on podcast audio feeds predominantly with Turn Years, which is now coming back, but he'd been hosting that, and he'd been doing news pieces on the podcast feeds. And yeah, we did a show together. We've done a couple of shows last year when Lawrence would be on the road touring or on holiday. But yeah, we did a show, had a lot of fun, had some nice feedback. So that is on YouTube. You can watch the video on YouTube, the Wrestling Arena, and it is on the Wrestling Arena or MOS Network podcast feeds, whichever one you are subscribed to. So be sure to check that out if you're a wrestling fan. I can see we have a new follower. We have it, Eddie the Beast. So thank you very much, Eddie. I assume that is Eddie Hickey from the Wrestling Arena chat. Welcome, Eddie. I know he's a big fan of the Ministry of Horror when I used to put it out on YouTube, and obviously now this year we are Twitch only. Or if that isn't Eddie Hickey, then welcome anyway, Eddie the Beast. Maybe Eddie the Beast is Eddie the Beast Hall? Eddie Hall? I don't know, maybe. Who knows? The internet's a funny old thing. Fran the Cannon is also in the chat now. Hey, Fran. I hope you're well, and I know you enjoyed the wrestling show as well. And Vix, I know you listened in on the wrestling show too. Happy Thursday, you two both. So yeah, we talked about Poltergeist a couple of weeks ago. That was a lot of fun. This week we are talking about Phantasm. So Phantasm is one of those film series where it may not have the name recognition of Poltergeist or a future show, which is going to be on the Omen series. No. It's not your A-list film franchise. You don't really see the films getting shown on Channel 4 late at night or on terrestrial TV or Freeview kind of ever. But it's incredibly beloved. It's one of those film franchises. I'd probably say a step up easily from the Maniac Cop series, from the House series. But it's an enduring franchise that has endured across 5 decades. Yeah, basically 5. I mean, there was one decade missing, but in terms of from where they started to the final entry or final version to date, 5 decades. And don't they look it by the end of it? Well, we'll get to that. Age catches up to all of us, so I'm not going to throw too much shade on those guys. But yeah, we'll be talking about that a little bit later on. But first off, we're going to talk about some horror news, though. This is the news. There you go. I've had a little spin in there. I've had a little horror spin in there. I can't just, rip off the MOS news music, the Wrestling Arena news music. I'll put a little. I haven't done any editing. I've just pressed 2 buttons at once, so don't give me too much credit. Fran the Can in the chat said might have to try and get to the cinema this week to see Meg 2. Oh well, that is in the new film release news, and no doubt Vix will be wanting to go to the cinema to see that too. As she's just popped up in the chat, my thoughts exactly, Fran. I want to see that and the one about the hand thing. Oh, that would be Talk to Me, which I very much want to watch. So this comes from bloodydisgusting.com. 6 new horror movies releasing this week, including Meg 2 The Trench in theatres, written up by John Squires. So these are the releases from August 1st to August 6th. First up, Ghastly Brothers is streaming exclusively on Screambox now. The Dutch supernatural horror comedy harkens back to such gateway horrors as Ghostbusters, Beetlejuice, and Goosebumps. Before I go into the blurb of the film, I quite like that term, actually. Gateway horrors. And I mean, maybe that's a potential thing for like a future discussion on the show, because you could look at things like Ghostbusters and Beetlejuice and Goosebumps and say, well, they're not really horror. I mean, Goosebumps is kind of like adolescent horror, or it's horror for kids, or something like Are You Afraid of the Dark? But yeah, they are gateway horrors because they are not scary overtly, but elements of creepiness, elements of the supernatural that's geared towards a bit more of a family focus, but with a little bit of an edge. To varying degrees. I mean, Ghostbusters had some adult humour in there, Beetlejuice and whatnot, visuals and stuff. But yeah, I quite like that term, gateway horrors. I mean, I would initially kind of consider Critters as a gateway horror, but that is a horror. I just happened to watch it very, very young. Interesting. Anyway, Lilith is sent to boarding school where she meets the Ghastly Brothers, a pair of strange ghost hunters. Together, they need to rid the school of the demons who have made it their home. You can use Screambox, not here in the UK though, because of course. Why would we get it? On iOS, Android, Apple TV, Prime Video, Roku, YouTube TV, I almost said YouTube TV, Samsung, Comcast, Cox, Philo, and Screambox.com. I'm guessing that Cox, with an X, is a streaming platform. Don't know. Never heard of it. And also, just to give them a little cheap plug, from now until August 11th, new users can sign up for 99 cents a month for the first 3 months at screambox.com/offers/scream99. That's a pretty good offer. I don't know what it is normally because we don't get it in the UK. Boo-hoo. Officially the highest grossing film in the entire Insidious franchise, new sequel Insidious The Red Door is still raking in money in theatres, and it's now available to watch at home. Catching us completely by surprise this morning, Insidious The Red Door is now available to purchase for $24.99 or rent for $19.99 on digital platforms including Amazon and Vudu. So that will be your home premiere cost, where you're paying essentially twice as much as the cinema, but you're saving on fuel, you're saving on the expensive popcorn and whatnot. And if you've got a decent audio and TV setup at home, then why not? Why not? I've done it before with, it might have been Scream 2000 and Scream 5. I can't remember what year it was released. 2021, I think, something like that. 2022. It's worth doing, but I mean, I couldn't do it every time because it is £20 to rent a film. That's a lot of money. But if you just don't fancy the cinema, or it's not viable to get down there, and you think it's going to be out of the cinema rotation by the time I get there, it's worth doing. Anyway, the horror franchise's original cast is back in Insidious: The Red Door, directed by and starring Patrick Wilson. Family secrets will be revealed as the Lamberts head back into the further for one more time, encountering demons from the past as well as brand new terrors. I believe I gave the film a 6 or 6.5 out of 10. It's decent. It is good. It's got some quite good scare moments in it. The pacing is a little off in comparison to the other films in the franchise. Not necessarily a bad thing. It's its own film, and it's the first time director for Patrick Wilson. But there's a couple of little disjointed moments in the narrative where I just wonder if there will be a director's cut or some sort of extended release at some point in the future. Who knows? Next up, Netflix's new horror movie, Zom 100, Bucket List of the Dead, will premiere on Thursday, August 3rd, a feature-length live-action adaptation of the Japanese manga. Zom 100, Bucket List of the Dead, is said to be a fresh zombie comedy come to life, packed with laughs and thrills for anyone stressed out by modern society. Written by Haro Aso and illustrated by Kitaro Takata, the manga series Zom 100 Bucket List of the Dead debuted in October 2018. Here's the plot synopsis for the live-action movie. Akiro Tendo works at an exploitative company where he suffers endless hours and harassment from his boss, spending more days feeling dead than alive. He awakes to discover his town has been devastated and overtaken by zombies and suddenly feels excited at the prospect of not needing to go into the office anymore. We've all been there. Not so much now with home working from home, because it's more just a case of I just don't want to go into the office if I don't have to. After witnessing an older co-worker he looked up to become a zombie, he comes to the realization that he'd rather be eaten by zombies if he can't do what he wants. Akira comes up with a bucket list of 100 things he wants to do before becoming a zombie. He crosses these items off the list as he experiences stay-at-home camping. It's going into a few things here which I think are probably fairly spoilery territory. It seems to be one of those blurbs that maybe gives away a bit too much, but that sounds pretty exciting. It's premiering today, apparently. I don't know if in the UK. Let me do my usual unprofessional logging on to an app. Apologies, podcast listeners. It is there, Zom 100 Bucket List of the Dead, and the artwork looks mental. Cool, fine. I'm going to add that to the list. From the chat, the anime version of Zom 100 is also coming out and looks better. Oh, okay. Interesting. Next up, the big screen is set to be attacked by a giant shark this week. Talking about animes, I did see a trailer for a new series of Castlevania called Castlevania Nocturne. I'm tempted to try and restart Castlevania and give it a proper go, because the first season, on the whole, I thought was decent, but I think I just watched it so staggered that I kept forgetting what was going on and kept forgetting what the storyline was and just sort of thinking, I mean, this looks good, but I've no idea what the plot is. I've completely lost the plot and then I lose interest. But I don't know if it's a prequel or how it's connected to the series. But yeah, Nocturne. Trailer for that came out earlier this week, I think, and it looks pretty good. Anyway, yes, big screen is set to be attacked by a giant shark this week in big budget sequel Meg 2 The Trench, which Warner Brothers will unleash on theatres on Friday, August 4th. Warner Brothers teases, get ready for the ultimate adrenaline rush this summer in Meg 2 The Trench, a literally larger-than-life thrill ride that supersizes the 2018 blockbuster and takes the action to higher heights and even greater depths, with multiple massive Megs and so much more. Dive into uncharted waters with Jason Statham and global action icon Wu Jing as they lead a daring research team on an exploratory dive into the deepest depths of the ocean. Their voyage spirals into chaos when a malevolent mining operation threatens their mission and forces them into a high-stakes battle for survival. Pitted against colossal megs and relentless environmental plunderers, our heroes must outrun, outsmart, and outswim their merciless predators in a pulse-pounding race against time. Immerse yourself in the most electrifying cinematic experience of the year with Meg 2, The Trench, where the depths of the ocean are matched only by the heights of sheer unstoppable excitement. Oh, it's directed by Ben Wheatley, which I think is pretty cool. He did In the Earth, Free Fire, A Field in England, I believe. I think he did Kill List as well. So he's got his horror chops. So it's going to be interesting to see how he adapts to a big budget action film. But funnily enough, we have a lot. That seems to be a lot of the case these days. Andreas Machietti, that's his name, who directed Mama and It Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, has since gone on to do The Flash. The guy, I can't remember his name, but his YouTube handle is Pony Smasher, directed Lights Out, and has since done the Shazam films. So there does seem to be that crossover of a successful horror director getting the opportunity to make a big budget action film. Yeah, fair play. Next up, it's Bride vs. Groom in the action-packed Till Death Do Us Part, which Bloody Disgusting's parent company, Cineverse, will bring exclusively to movie theatres on Friday, August 4th. The film hails from director Timothy Woodward Jr., director of the Lin Shaye horror movie The Call, as well as Final Destination creator Jeffrey Reddick. Till Death Do Us Part portrays the grim reality that not every romance story ends happily ever after. After running away on her wedding day, a bride-to-be must fight for survival against her former fiancé and his 7 deadly groomsmen. In the ultimate horror showdown, the groomsmen soon discover that she has no intention of going back to that she has no intention of going back to the life she left behind. With stylish violence and blood-soaked action, Till Death Do Us Part seamlessly blends the slick, kinetic thrills of John Wick with the dark, twisted revenge tale of Kill Bill. Cam Gigandet of Twilight stars alongside Natalie Byrne, Orlando Jones, and Jason Patric. There you go. So that sounds interesting, I guess. And then last up for the new films, Carter Smith of The Ruins is back with a brand new thriller, The Passenger, the latest collaboration between Blumhouse and Epic. Johnny Birchtold and Kyle Garner star in the film, coming to digital and on demand on Friday, August 4th. The film follows Randolph Bradley, who is perfectly content fading into the background, but when his co-worker Benson snaps and goes on a violent killing spree, he's forced to face his fears and confront his troubled past in order to find a way to survive. Liz Whale of The Cleaning Lady, which we have watched on stream before, and How to Get Away with Murder also stars. And The Passenger is written by Jack Stanley. That sounds pretty interesting. I do enjoy a good thriller, a good sort of tense thriller, and I've lost the title. It popped into my head for a moment there, but there's a sort of a similar film. I guess in terms of unintentionally being dragged along on a killing spree, or whether they were and they didn't know about it, or they did and no, I can't remember. But it instantly, for a moment, kind of made me think of California, the Brad Pitt, Juliette Lewis, and David Duchovny film from the early 90s. Probably nothing like that, to be honest, but it sounds interesting. And I'm always in the mood for a good thriller. You know, we don't get that many decent thrillers these days, or if we do, they're not really that well advertised. Fran in the chat, wonder how this compares to Ready or Not. Yes, could be fairly similar. Ready or Not is one of these films which I think is quite underwatched. It doesn't really get spoken about that much, but it's very, 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 very good. With Samara Weaving, I believe, starred in that. Next up, oh shit. Right, okay, I've already clicked it. I've closed a news story because I'm apparently impatient. Scream 7. Happy Death Day filmmaker Christopher Landon is officially on board to direct. This comes from John Squires, Bloody Disgusting. Bloody Disgusting was the first to tell you this morning that Radio Silence, who did VHS Southbound Ready or Not, Scream 5, that's just called Scream, and Scream 6 will not be returning to direct the upcoming Scream 7 due to scheduling issues. And they'll also let you know that Christopher Landon, who did Happy Death Day and Freaky, has been in talks to direct, and well, it looks like it's now official. The Hollywood Reporter made it official this afternoon, reporting that Spyglass has tapped Christopher Landon, a scary movie stalwart whose credits include the Happy Death Day movies, as well as body-switching horror comedy Freaky, to direct the 7th installment of the long-running franchise. Scream and Scream 6 directors Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett, Radio Silence, will remain on board as executive producers, as will Chad Villela. No word yet on who will be writing Scream 7, but THR reports that Melissa Barrera and Mason Gooding are expected to return. As for Jenna Ortega, only time will tell. THR notes Ortega's deal will be one to watch, as the actress signed onto the franchise before she was catapulted to the A-list thanks to Netflix's Wednesday. The ongoing WGA and SAG after strikes have halted production across Hollywood at this time, so it may be a while before production on Scream 7 actually gets underway. Landon also wrote the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 7th installments of the Paranormal Activity franchise, along with writing and directed Paranormal Activity: The Marked Ones. Needless to say, he's got a highly respectable horror pedigree as he heads into Woodsboro, and his previous work proves he has the right sensibilities for the Scream saga. Stay tuned. So that's pretty interesting. It's a shame that Radio Silence aren't able to come back. I really enjoyed Scream 6. I thought Scream 5 was pretty good. Certainly, I thought it was pretty good, pretty decent. A good kind of reboot to the franchise. Scream 6, I really thoroughly enjoyed that film. So much so it's sat in my basket still on Amazon. Umming and ahhing between the 4K and the regular Blu-ray. But yeah, Christopher Landon. I mean, I've seen both Happy Death Day films and Freaky. I enjoy them. All three films. I mean, obviously, I suppose I should just say the Happy Death Day films and Freaky, because those first two are in their own kind of universe. Have a similar sort of tone and feel to them. So much so that it initially felt like Freaky was in the same universe, like it was a Happy Death Day film because it's got this supernatural element to it. Like Happy Death Day is like Groundhog Day. This Freaky is essentially Freaky Friday. So I don't necessarily think that tone is going to be carried across to Scream 7, but it'll be interesting to see what kind of tone we get. Will the director put his own stamp on it, or will it kind of follow the path of the Radio Silence guys, who kind of followed in the path of Wes Craven, but given it their own spin as well and their own sort of voice. So far, interesting. I mean, at the moment the strikes are halting everything, but they should get paid properly. So there you go. Moving on. The Bride. Maggie Gyllenhaal is reportedly remaking Bride of Frankenstein for Netflix. While Renfield brought Universal classic monster Dracula into the present earlier this year, Netflix reportedly aims to tackle a Bride of Frankenstein remake, The Bride, with Maggie Gyllenhaal as director. It's first reported by World of Real. The news comes from Production Weekly, which cites Penelope Cruz as the Bride, Christian Bale as Frankenstein, and Peter Sarsgaard among the cast. In the original 1935 film from director James Whale, after recovering from injuries sustained in the mob attack upon himself and his creation, Dr. Frankenstein falls under the control of his former mentor, Dr. Pretorius, who insists the now chastened doctor resume his experiments in creating new life. Meanwhile, the monster remains on the run from those who wish to destroy him without understanding that his intentions are generally good, despite his lack of socialization and self-control. So there's no plot details at the moment. The Universal attempts to bring back the monster classics haven't really been successful. I enjoyed Renfield. I mean, the focus is on Renfield as the title character, as opposed to Dracula, although Dracula, played by Nicolas Cage, does have a very strong role in the film. But for whatever reason, these Universal monster films, and they also get a lot of advertising as well, aren't pulling in the tickets. I mean, they kind of shot themselves in the foot when they had the Dark Universe that was announced with The Mummy, and The Mummy just bombed. And I didn't mind The Mummy. I mean, I thought The Mummy was fine. It wasn't as bad as it was being made out to be, but it certainly wasn't coming across as a new franchise or new universe Kickstarter. And it wasn't. Bride of Frankenstein, I guess, is similar to something like The Creature from the Black Lagoon. One of those products or characters where you could say, why haven't they had more modern iterations of them? You know, the iconic imagery is what we saw in the 30s, and Creature from the Black Lagoon a bit later on. Who knows? Who knows? They've been trying. There's been various plans, as it says here, for a Bride of Frankenstein remake over the years. A24 is going to do a film called Bride of the Dark Universe, as we mentioned. And we did talk about these sort of things when we did the Universal Monsters episode last year of the Ministry of Horror. Yeah, not sure. Next up, the Severin Films Super Shock Pop-Up Film Festival returns to Hollywood with 3 exclusive mystery screenings. The fine folks over at Severin Films are hosting another mystery screening event at Brain Dead Studios in Los Angeles, California. Bloody Disgusting has learnt this week. Obviously, this comes from John Squires, bloodydisgusting.com. The Severin Films Super Shock Pop-Up Film Festival 2023 is taking place at Brain Dead Studios Theatre in West Hollywood on August 19th. Tickets are available now. The event will feature 3 exclusive mystery preview screenings of upcoming Severin disc releases that haven't yet been announced, along with sneak peek trailers and promos. Okay, so if you are in the Hollywood area, why not check out the Pop-Up Film Festival? I mean, film festivals are always a good laugh. We don't really get that many of them in the UK. There's Fright Fest in London, and sometimes in London. I think it's sometimes in Glasgow. I've never been. I've only ever been to a what's called the Dirt in the Gate. I think it is film festival, Grind Fest. I've been to a couple of years of that in Bournemouth. That's always really good. Classic films on 8mm prints. I think. I can't remember. It's been a while. Been a few years. Latest gameplay trailer has been released for Fort Solis, and it ramps up the creepiness. With their psychological cosmic sci-fi thriller, Fort Solis, releasing in a few weeks, developer Fallen Leaf and Dear Villagers have released an all-new gameplay trailer. The short but sweet trailer showcases the eerie setting of Fort Solis, while also offering quick glimpses of the game's mechanics. We wanted Fort Solis to tell a story through a mix of interactivity and artistry, said James Tinsdale, game director at Fallen Leaf. Using state-of-the-art mocap performances, high-fidelity Unreal Engine 5 graphics, music by legendary composer Ted White, and our all-star cast of professional actors, we sought to create a truly immersive experience that grounds players in this sci-fi mystery. With our cinematic story-first approach, got my attention. We wanted to distill the essence of a sci-fi thriller into a format that anyone can play, including non-gamers. Dear Villagers aim to have Fort Solis ground players in its hard sci-fi drama with no camera cuts, load times, or HUD. Inspired by titles like Firewatch, Yas, and Until Dawn, Yas, Fort Solis offers a hybrid piece of media emphasizing narration and immersion that's told across 4 chapters, which can be binged in one intense session or played chapter by chapter like a Netflix series. Fort Solis centers around engineer Jack Leary, played by Roger Clark, who responds to a distress signal in the midst of a sandstorm in the blood-red wasteland of the Martian desert. Players can explore the Fort Solis station at their own pace, gathering clues from its bunkers, labs, crew quarters, and harsh stormy surface to understand just what exactly happened to its inhabitants. As the night grows longer, events escalate, spiraling out of control, and the mystery as to what's really going on deepens. It comes out August 22nd on PS5 and PC via Steam. There will also be a physical release courtesy of Merge Games. Let's have a quick look at this trailer. Okay, I'm just going to skip through. Okay. 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 Let's go. That looks pretty cool. A narrative focused sci fi mystery thriller horror, because there does seem to be horror elements in that trailer. Now we're talking. Now we found a game that I can stream, because we know that I like the narrative focused games. Life is Strange, love those games. Firewatch, I know there is a new Firewatch out now, but I'm going to wait till it's on. It's quite cheap. I'm going to wait till it's on sale, because not Firewatch. What am I talking about? Oxenfree. There's a new Oxenfree game out, but Firewatch is cool. Oxenfree was cool. Oxenfree 2 has just come out, but I'm going to wait till that comes down in price, because I've spent too much money in the last couple of months on games. So not this month. That's going to be a in future months sale. But Solace though, that looks premium, and because it's not big budget, it's not a big studio game. I imagine this won't be full price, like a 60-70 quid game. I think this could be a 30 to 40 pound game. Graphics look sick. So Fort Solace, guys, keep an eye out for that. It comes out later this month. And then finally on the news, Inside Number 9, Season 8 of the British genre anthology series has arrived on BritBox, or will be arriving, on BritBox later this month. Comes from Megan Navarro at blowdisgusting.com. Season 8 of Inside Number 9 was one of the best series you're likely not watching, but should, and it's finally arriving stateside later this month thanks to the streaming service BritBox. Created by UK comedy duo Reece Shearsmith, who's in the Earth and Venom, Let There Be Carnage, and Steve Pemberton of Good Omens, is the genre-bending anthology series, and its distinct style of dark humour is returning to BritBox in its 8th season with new episodes on August 25th. So I think the 8th season may well have just been what was on... Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was what was just been on BBC Two recently. And it was excellent. I mean, I don't think Inside Number 9 has had a bad season. I would honestly recommend, if people have never given it a go. It's two of the three guys, or technically there's two of the four guys who made The League of Gentlemen. It's very different to The League of Gentlemen. They also did Psychoville. There's a little bit of a crossover episode with Psychoville, but again, it's very different to that. It's an anthology series. Every episode is a different story, with Steve Pemberton and Reece Shearsmith playing a different character each time, with different cast with them. But some of the episodes are so powerful, funny, dark, twisted. You get a bit of everything, in each season. I've actually got scripts. I don't know if we've talked about this before in an episode, but these are the season 1 to season 3 scripts in a lovely hardback box. I saw that on Amazon last year, I think, actually. So I don't know if they'll be doing any of the later season scripts, but it's a lovely collection. Friend in the chat, have you seen the trailer for Slaughterhouse, A Killer Sloth? No. That sounds insane. I'll have to check it out at some point, but no, A Killer Sloth? And that's going to lead us on nicely to our featured presentation. Here we go. God, we are blitzing through this. We are keeping it lean. No dicking around tonight. I just don't want to go to bed stupidly late. I just did not sleep well at all last night. We are talking about the Phantasm series, film series, franchise. Mentioned at the top of the show, it is a franchise that it's a franchise where horror fans are either going to know the series and just know that it's either about the spheres, the flying spheres, or the tall man, or they've seen the series or just never heard of it. It's a beloved franchise, but one that just for whatever reason, just has never been in that big budget, big, known realm. They're not shown on Netflix. Currently, I've signed up to the Arrow Player to watch it. I'm going to stick with the Arrow Player for a little while. Shudder is getting bullshit. The Shudder Player on Prime no longer features the newest films, because one of the things that I'd go for when I'm, especially for reviews of the show, for doing reviews on the show, I should say, would be going to the Shudder Player on Amazon and going to what's new. I go, okay, here's the new films. For whatever reason, they've taken that out, and now it just says best watched or most watched, and then horror, thriller, TV. Well, that's great. Why aren't you advertising your new releases on there? How are the viewers who don't follow Shudder on social media going to know what your new films are? It's fucking dumb. That being said, I do follow Shudder on Facebook. I rarely go on Facebook, but if I do, I will go to their page, and they have new releases for the month. It is getting sparser and sparser for UK Shudder. I don't know what's going on. Whether this is connected to the whole AMC layoffs or the AMC Plus issues that we talked about, near the start of the year, maybe. But a lot of the classic films seem to have found their way onto Arrow. So when I went onto the Arrow Player to do the free trial, and it's $4.99 a month, it's the same price as Shudder. I noticed that a lot of these kind of classic horror films are on the Arrow Player. I mean, you want to talk about classic horror films, like fucking hell. Freevee keeps putting out bangers. They've now got Return of the Living Dead on Freevee. They've got a brand new film on Freevee with Justin Long in it, which I remember us talking about in the news last year. Not to go off on a tangent because we're talking about Phantasm, but if I just go to horror, House of Darkness, they've got Dog Soldiers on Freevee. The Taking is kind of disturbing. Get Out is on Freevee. The Prom Night films, it's From Beyond. From Beyond's flipping mental. It's brilliant. Anyway, we always have a little wank fest of Freevee because it's just got so much good stuff on it, and it's free. It's just got ad breaks. We can deal with that. But back to Phantasm. It's a film series that consists of 5 films, novels, comic books, and merchandise. It is mainly about the Tall Man, played by Angus Scrimm, a supernatural and malevolent undertaker and the main antagonist, who turns the dead into dwarf zombies to do his bidding and take over the world. He is opposed by a young boy, Mike, predominantly played by A. Michael Baldwin, who tries to convince his older brother, Jody, played by Bill Thornbury, and family friend Reggie, played by Reggie Bannister, of the threat. The first film was released in 1979, received generally positive reviews, and has garnered a cult following. So, let's, before we start talking about the films, let's look at the development of the Phantasm series. And when we start talking about the film plots, for those especially who haven't seen any of the Phantasm films, you will probably ask questions like, wait, what? Huh? Come again? Yeah. But just don't worry about it. Don't worry about logic. So development. The story idea for the original film came to Don Coscarelli in a dream. One night in his late teens, he dreamed of fleeing down endlessly long marble corridors, pursued by a chrome sphere intent on penetrating his skull with a wicked needle. There was also a quite futuristic sphere dispenser, out of which the orbs would emerge and begin chasing him. Originally, writer-director Don Coscarelli considered the first film's ending to be conclusive and did not feel knowledgeable about writing a sequel. But Coscarelli had what he described as a breakthrough when he realised that he could start the film immediately after the previous film's final scene. He also added a road movie element in which Reggie and Mike combat the tall man, after which he described the process as straightforward. For instance, Coscarelli has later revealed that some elements of this movie were influenced by Stephen King, especially a few aspects of his novel Salem's Lot. For instance, the end of the novel, when the characters go out on the road chasing down vampires, gave him the road movie idea of Mike and Reggie chasing the tall man. Universal Studios took an interest in the film because they wanted a horror series, allocating $3 million. This was the lowest budget of any of their films in the 80s, but it was the highest budget of any Phantasm film. Greg Nicotero and Robert Kurtzman, later of KNB EFX, were recruited for special effects. The studio exerted much control over the film, and they did not allow Coscarelli to include any dream sequences or ambiguity. That's probably why the second film is one of the most concise or conclusive, you could argue. The executives also wanted to recast both A. Michael Baldwin and Reggie Bannister because they were unknown and had been out of the movie business since the release of the first movie. Don Coscarelli resisted their efforts and was forced to audition A. Michael Baldwin and Reggie Bannister for the opportunity to reprise their roles. In the end, his efforts won him a concession. He was allowed to keep one of the two, but had to replace the other. Coscarelli chose to keep Bannister and cast James LaGrosse in Baldwin's place. After the mild box office results of Phantasm 2, Universal Studios chose not to personally pursue a sequel, but did offer to distribute it should Don Coscarelli and Associates make it themselves. With no casting restrictions this time, Coscarelli offered the role of Mike to his original performer, A. Michael Baldwin, who returned to the role after almost 16 years in Phantasm 3, Lord of the Dead. We will talk about the individual films, but let's just kind of go through the production development. With no casting restrictions this time, Coscarelli offered Roger Avery, a self-confessed hardcore fan of the Phantasm series, wrote an epic screenplay originally called Phantasm 1999 AD. As the follow-up to Phantasm 3, Lord of the Dead. It was set in a post-apocalyptic near future featuring Bruce Campbell as a co-star. As the time passed and they couldn't get the budget needed, around $10 million, Don Coscarelli wrote and directed a fourth installment entitled Phantasm 4 Oblivion as a precursor to the project that was conveniently retitled Phantasm 2012 AD before renaming the planned film as Phantasm's End. Ultimately, when the financing for such an ambitious sequel couldn't be secured, the idea was scrapped altogether. 2004, 6 years after the release of Phantasm 4 Oblivion, series director Don Coscarelli told Fangoria, I'd also still like to do another Phantasm film. Reggie Bannister and Angus Scrimm are still in great shape and raring to go. In March 2005, Coscarelli was in the final stages of talks with New Line Cinema to produce a new entry. Reportedly, the new film was being developed as a relaunch and as a possible trilogy about Mike's coming of age. This version never came to fruition. Rumours about a sequel were reignited in June 2007 by footage contained in Don Coscarelli's Farewell to Alamo Draft House, featuring Angus Scrimm and A. Michael Baldwin in their roles. In an interview, Reggie Bannister stated there was no activity or development of a fifth film, but that anything was possible in the future. June 2012, rumours again surfaced that Coscarelli would begin a new Phantasm sequel. According to a report on Dread Central, the script was completed and filming would begin later in the year. Coscarelli disputed this claim, publicly stating, I have no solid news to report on a new project now. The director, however, was being coy with film news sites. According to what Coscarelli and new co-writer-director David Hartman told Entertainment Weekly, the film was shot secretly in and around Southern California during 2012 and 2013. March 26, 2014, news of Ravager's completion was released via various film news sites. The next day, a trailer debuted on the film's official site. In a 2014 sneak peek video preview on the official Phantasm website, director Hartman mentioned in quick passing, this thing is going to be in the can 2015 for sure. By October 2015, Ravager was completed and awaiting a distributor. So. If you have never seen a Phantasm film, we talked about it briefly in terms of the general gist of it. Don't worry too much about the plot. There is a plot. There is a story that continues from one film into the next, and that is one of the unique things with the Phantasm series. Generally, the next film in the series starts when the last film ended. And hallmarks, I suppose, are that, and also it looking like everyone's going to die at the end of the previous film, and then somehow they haven't. Happens a few times, let's just say that. But Angus Scrim, who, if you're watching on the live Twitch channel, he is the tall man who you can see on screen now, and he has quite a powerhouse performance. He is one of those evil antagonists that, if you know, you know. But if you don't, he should really be up there with like a maybe not Freddy Krueger, because Freddy Krueger became more about the quips as time went on. But certainly should have become a more iconic villain in the pantheon of horror films from the 70s and 80s and 90s, more specifically, I suppose. His performance by Angus Scrim is very muted, but that adds to the terror. The guy is incredible. I don't know how tall he is in real life, but he looks like he's a giant at times. No, it doesn't say how tall the tall man is. But there's a lot of ambiguity in the first Phantasm film. Essentially, a family friend of Jody and his younger brother Mike is killed by a seductive woman. And at the funeral, they notice there are some strange goings on involving this funeral home. And this introduces us to a number of the staples of the series. We mentioned about Don Coscarelli's nightmare, which kind of helped him conceive this of these long hallways in a mortuary, and we get that a lot. And that's one of the standout visuals in these films, is the really creepy mortuary. Not sure if the correct term for those hallways is a mortuary, or if there's a different term associated with that. It's in a cemetery, but it's in the, don't know. There's probably another term for it, which is more of American centric. That's just not in my vocabulary at the moment. It's just escaping me. But that's one of those hallmarks of the series. The flying spheres, which really until I think the fourth film, or the third... It's the third film. You don't actually know... No, it's by the fourth film, I think. You don't really naturally know what they are. Maybe it's the third. Third film. Right. Anyway, sorry. I've watched quite a few of these in the last few days. But he controls these flying spheres, which shoot out blades out the front, and they stab into someone's head before a drill comes in, which drills into their brain, and then blood spurts out the back of the ball. It basically drains their skull of brain fluid. We find out later on in the series, as the series develops, that it's essentially, it sucks out their brain, and it's kind of carries their consciousness in there. That's one of the reasons why it does what it does. But we also find out more about his crushed down dwarf zombies. That's the other thing in the first film. The first film, you don't really get much information other than that there's a creepy tall guy who is seemingly stealing bodies from the morgue, and he has these helpers who are dwarfs, hooded dwarfs, that are murderous. And he also has access to another realm. Again, I'm trying to not confuse too much between the information that's revealed to us in Phantasm and in Phantasm 2 and the later sequels. But this is an interesting feature. It was made on a budget of $300,000, featuring, other than maybe Angus Scrim, non-professional actors. Although I would say that their performances are pretty decent, considering they are, at that point, not pros. Reggie Bannister, I think, is great. He's got kind of a smaller role in this film than he does in the later films. This film is sort of headed up by I suppose A. Michael Baldwin and his brother Bill Thornbury playing Jodie Pearson, and A. Michael Baldwin as Mike Pearson. And by having, I suppose, your central character being this young kid, it's kind of reminiscent of those films where your protagonist is in a horror situation as a kid, so it makes it more relatable to the teenage audience who are seeing this, probably staying up too late at night to watch a horror film, and putting into that scenario, kind of, I suppose, similar to like a Fright Night, where the teen is seeing something happening at night in their town and people aren't believing them, or when they are believing them, it's too late. Fright Night being Charlie Brewster seeing his neighbour as a vampire. But in this, he is seeing something nefarious is going on at this new mortuary. And yeah, details wise, there's not really too much we can really talk about Phantasm. It ends with a bit of a sort of a dream sequence where it's almost put forth that the events of the film that occurred were a dream, because what you believe has happened may not be what's actually happened. It appears as though the tall man has been destroyed or has been caved in an avalanche. But Mike wakes up in his bed still worrying about the tall man, but Reggie, who'd earlier on been stabbed to death, is still alive and tells Mike that he had a nightmare and that Jodie had actually died in a car wreck, leaving Mike by himself because his parents died prior to the film. Before the tall man appears and hands crash through the bedroom mirror, pulling Mike inside. So, as mentioned, you got to get used to the fact the end of the film is going to look like your main characters have died, or what you thought has occurred may not have necessarily actually occurred. For good or bad, I guess it really depends on. I mean, normally for me, if a film ends with it was all a dream, I think, well, that's bullshit. You've wasted my time. And this almost does that before the tall man appearance and the murderous dwarfs appear again. But yeah, it's got a decent score, but the score is quite a minimalistic score. It's got a fairly identifiable main theme. But the main theme, I guess, is it's kind of similar in terms of complexity to the John Carpenter Halloween score. It's obviously nowhere near as iconic. But again, in terms of it's quite a simplistic, plinky plonky piano melody that then descends half a note, so it just flattens. I think it just continues doing that. It's not very complex, but it plays quite a unique theme which features throughout the series. Made on a budget of $300,000, its box office is between either 22 million or 6.8 million. I mean, if it's 6.8 million and 22 million has been plucked out of nowhere, then that's still a very, profitable return. Which then led to the 1988, bloody hell, 9 years later, the 1988 sequel, Phantasm 2. So as mentioned, Phantasm 2 had a bit of recasting. A. Michael Baldwin was unable to come back, instead being replaced by James LaGrosse due to the studio saying, your leads haven't acted since the last film. We can't put a film out without a professional actor in it. And no disrespect to A. Michael Baldwin, but Reggie kind of carries this film, and you could even argue he carries the series. So keeping Reggie Bannister, I think, was a wise move. Just going to see if Reggie Bannister has done much outside the series. He is 77. He's done quite a lot of films. Most recently, 2017's Bone Jangles. Not Another B movie. He was in The Quiet Ones, which I feel I've seen a film called The Quiet Ones. He was in The Mangler Reborn. Jesus. Baba Hotep. Phantasm 4. Wishmaster. Oh, it was the pharmacist and Wishmaster. No. He's been in a few things. Okay. So Phantasm 2, again directed by Don Coscarelli and written by him as well. The film's protagonist, Mike, has recently been released from a mental institution. He recruits Reggie and some new friends in an effort to defeat the villain Tall Man. So, whilst this continues directly on from the end of the first film, it kind of ignores the moment when Mike gets pulled through the window by the little dwarf killers. And instead it focuses on he believes that the Tall Man has killed his brother and is after them, but Reggie, again, whether this is he's had his brain wiped or it's an alternate reality, and we can talk about alternative realities a bit later on as the series goes on, who knows, but it's a situation where he believes that this supernatural horror has occurred, no one else does. Unfortunately for Reggie, his family gets blown up. His wife and daughter, I believe. And he then comes across Mike, takes him out the mental asylum, and they go on this. They start having this road movie type film, and that's pretty much how the series continues from this point onwards. Phantasm 2 through to 5 are road movies. And it works pretty well, really. It kind of works that this Tall Man, what are his plans? Why would he just be taking the dead from one town? What does he need them for? Does he travel around? So on and so forth. But there was a bit of criticism because of recasting Mike with LaGrosse instead of Baldwin. I think LaGrosse does all right in this. I don't know how much other stuff he has done. He is definitely a professional actor. His filmography is much larger. Still working today. He was recently in a film called Showing Up. And he works in TV as well. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but it wasn't taken that well. I initially thought that maybe they'd recast him to age him up because he is essentially a kid in the first film, and this action would be kind of similar to, I suppose, the gap between Friday the 13th Part 4, The Final Friday, and Friday the 13th Part 7, Jason Lives, recasting Corey Feldman. I can't remember if it was due to Corey Feldman becoming a bigger star at that time, or money, or they wanted an older, whatever his name was, the character's name. God, the name escapes me. Whoever Corey played, someone will know, in the Friday films. I didn't know if it was a situation like that, but there's been 9 years that have passed, so the kid playing A. Michael Baldwin would no longer be a kid anymore. So, yeah, it turns out it was the studio interfering there. I don't think it's the end of the world, personally. He does an alright performance. We get some decent gore in this entry. As mentioned earlier on, the dream sequences are a little bit less. This is our proper introduction to Reggie being a hound dog, or a poon hound. In the first film, there's not really too much mention of his family, but essentially he is the bold pal of Jodie and Mike, who's also an ice cream man. He's been kind of then dragged into the situation after all the stuff with the Tall Man, and his family have now been blown up, which kind of leads him onto this road of revenge as well. They've both got a piece of the pie that they need from the Tall Man for revenge. But I don't know how big the gap. I can't remember how big the gap is between his family getting killed and the events of Phantasm 2. But my goodness, this is the introduction of Poonhound Reggie, because he wants his revenge. That's 50% of his focus. The other 50% is getting laid. And certainly his antics in the third film, when watching through a 2023 lens, would be probably considered a bit problematic to an extent. Yeah, but yeah, he is quite persistent in trying to pull, because the road gets lonely, as he tells Mike. I think you can infer from that what you will. So we get more gore in this. We get the introduction of Reggie's iconic 4-barrel shotgun, which is really cool. I mean, it's very unwieldy, but it is quite a cool item. We get some more sphere deaths. I believe it's in this film that we get the introduction to the red hellscape. It's goddamn hellscape, where the tall man appears to come from. We get a bit more of an idea of what he's doing with the bodies. He is essentially, I don't think in this one we find out that what he's doing with their brains, but he is crushing them down into these barrels, which then get sent through this portal, which then ends on this harsh hellscape planet, where they then come out of these tubs as these short dwarf killing monsters. Yeah, I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but it is quite entertaining. Right? Honestly, trust me. This is one of the many deaths of the tall man in it. I believe in this one, he uses embalming fluid that he obviously puts into the bodies before crushing them down. They replace that with hydrochloric acid. And when he's going to stab this into one of the girls who's chummied up with Mike, they stab it into him, which then melts out his body from the inside out. It's a very cool effect. You can certainly tell that Phantasm 2 had some money behind it. 3 million to be specific. But only made 7.3, which is a bit of a shame. The gore in this is on point. Certainly has to be said. And let's just have a little look. We talked about the production. Yeah, you had Greg Nicotero and Robert Kurtzman on the effects for the film, and it does show. I think it does kind of come across in that way. I enjoy it. I feel that whilst it's got one of the lower Rotten Tomatoes scores, I do think that's a bit harsh, and I think a lot of that could just be because A. Michael Baldwin isn't back in it. I get he was Mike in the first film, but I didn't think it was necessarily a standout performance, not like a Reggie performance. So him being recast for a film, it may just be a backlash due to the circumstances of his recasting. I guess that makes a bit more sense if you're a diehard fan, and the reason why one of the leads isn't back is due to the studio. Yeah, maybe you would take a bit more of a stance against it. But Phantasm 2, can't remember how that one ends. They'll blend into one after a while. That then led us, again, a bit of a gap. When was Phantasm 2? 88. So that led us to June 6th, 1994, when we got Phantasm 3, Lord of the Dead. Possibly my favourite. It is batshit crazy, but I do quite enjoy it, even though it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's a 1994 American science fantasy horror film and the second sequel in the Phantasm series, written and directed by Don Coscarelli, starring Angus Scrimm as Tall Man, Reggie Bannister, and returning is A. Michael Baldwin. It immediately follows the apparent demise at the end of the previous film. A new Tall Man emerges from his dimension fork. At the same time, after being attacked and ejected from the hearse, carrying Mike and Liz. Yeah, it looks like Reggie died at the end of Phantasm 2. Again, it looked like he died at the end of the first film before the little scene at the end. A still alive Reggie watches the car drive on and explode. Reggie finds Liz dead, who then gets decapitated for just... she's already dead, so I don't know why they took her head. And saves Mike from the Tall Man by threatening to kill them all with a grenade. The Tall Man retreats with Liz's head, but promises to return when Mike is well again. So I think this has got the most kind of almost cohesive storyline, even though it is mental, in that the Tall Man wants Mike almost as if to be like a protege, or to become one of his... It doesn't seem like he wants to turn him into one of his dwarves, but he certainly has machinations for Mike rather than just killing him. And that comes across very well in the film later on. But we do get proper horn dog. And yeah, we've got some cool effects in this film where the one of the spheres goes straight through someone's head, and they've just got a massive, perfect sphere of a hole in their face. This does potentially follow the trope, I suppose, maybe of some 90s films. Or it's a toss-up between trying to follow the trope of some 90s films by having the young, cool kid who's the sidekick and he's a bit of a badass, even though he's a kid, for the main character. Whether that is just following the trope or whether that is doing the later sequel trope in itself of going, hey, we're going to go back to the original, we're going to go back to the basics. You know, when a band has, sometimes as early as their third album, they've decided maybe our second album wasn't as well received, or maybe we tried to do something new and the fans didn't like it. Well, this new album, we are going back to our roots. And you get it quite often. There's a lot of bands. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of them by any stretch of the imagination. But Bring Me the Horizon spring to mind. Not Bring Me the Horizon, sorry. Bullet for My Valentine spring to mind, because they would do a metal album that would get them some recognition. I think they've done a few albums which weren't really to my tastes, but they then do one which is a bit more metal, straight up metal, get them some recognition, get them some airplay. But then the next album would look to capitalize on that airplay by doing more mainstream rock level music, and it wouldn't do very well. So then they'd follow that up with we're going back to our roots, baby. We are going back to the sound of this album that you all loved. And yeah, it would maybe work. Who knows? And then the next album would be, we're going to go a bit more mainstream because we're trying to experiment. And for me, it applies to films as well. But, you know, I'd prefer bands experiment with each release rather than just going, we're going to make the same album over and over again. Because, one, you may find something new in their style that you appreciate that you didn't think you'd appreciate, but also, two, it'll make you appreciate the good stuff even more. Whereas if they just did the same thing over and over again, it's kind of then harder to pinpoint your favorite stuff, because it's like, yeah, I mean, the first thing was good, and then they're all good. Yeah. The long and short of it is maybe they're going back to the basics by having a kid in the cast in this one. Essentially, the dead man is going from town to town and taking the dead, and Mike has gone doolally, so Reggie is looking for him after being can't remember. Anyway, he comes across this one town where these bandits, I guess you could call them, ne'er-do-wells, try to rob Reggie. But they come a cropper at this house where this kid is basically like McAllister, Macaulay Culkin from the Home Alone films. He's set up all these traps in his house, but they're quite murderous. He has a tomahawk axe that he throws in a woman's face. He shoots one guy, sets up this other guy to fall into a pit where he then shoots him. So this is a kid that's this is basically what could have happened to Macaulay Culkin if his parents never came home, and it was a bit of a hellscape world. Maybe, who knows? But he ends up joining up with Reggie in his hunt to save Mike. Reggie then comes across a woman and her friend. I think the woman's called Rocky, who becomes a bit of a fan favorite. And this is where Reggie, maybe it was endearing at the time, but in today's eyes, he does come across as a bit of a sex pest. In terms of they're having to share a motel bed because they're on the road, and you can't be spunking out money for multiple rooms. And yeah, he is a little bit overtly persistent in wanting to sleep with her. Fair play to her though. She's just like, oh, you want to get kinky? She gives him handcuffs, and then once he's handcuffed to the bed, she's like, right, night, and goes to sleep. It's a pretty funny scene, but he is in today's eyes, you look at it and think this is quite uncomfortable. Come on, Reggie, sort yourself out. But the gore is again up in this film. The spheres are, there's a variety of different spheres in this film. We see that they have the brains in them now, and we also see that there's a good sphere, and that good sphere has the essence in it of Jody. Jody is back in this film. His spirit essence is here to help Mike and Reggie and young Tim on their journey. It's quite cool. You could look at it and go, "This is really sort of cheesy," but it's sci-fi fantasy nuts. It's fun. It comes across endearing. That's one of the things with the Phantasm series is it has heart. It's endearing. It can be quite funny, but it can also be quite gory and quite creepy, especially the mausoleum. I think that's the term I was trying to think of earlier. These mausoleum hallways, very creepy, quite gothic architecture. Really looks quite nice. We also see, as the film is going on, that something is being put into Mike. There's a moment which is quite creepy where the tall man starts experimenting on Mike and he's drilling into his head. And Mike is screaming away. It's quite nasty. But what it appears is that he has somehow put a sphere into Mike's head, or he's maybe done something to Mike to then start extracting a sphere that somehow formed in his brain. Not too sure, but we get a moment later on when Mike's eyes have turned into spheres, and it looks very cool because he's just suddenly got these silver shining eyes. It's very cool. Again, take logic out of the scenario for a moment. It looks as though the tall man has been destroyed. They remembered that he has a weakness to ice and cold, tried to use it against him, but as per always the case, the tall man appears again. Reggie, as you may have seen on the screen, is held up by all of these spheres. And then Tim gets suddenly attacked by a zombie in the freezer and pulled through a glass window, mirroring the ending of the first film. So yeah, maybe it was doing a whole thing of, hey, we're back to the basics, guys. Ignore the second film to an extent in terms of tone, but we're back to the first film. But that's the last time we see Tim. Now, props to the actor that played Tim, Kevin Connors. I don't know if he's ever done any more acting, but having a cocky, badass little kid in a film could easily go very wrong. He could easily come across as fucking annoying and irritating to the nth degree. But the kid does pretty good acting actually in this, and when he points a gun at someone, you don't think, oh, fuck off, it's a kid pointing a gun at someone. That's a joke. He does a good performance, actually. And his little quips with Reggie, not bad. His acting chops in this, not bad. So if he didn't continue acting, and it doesn't appear... Let me just go onto IMDb. It doesn't appear that he has a Wikipedia. Kevin Connors playing Tim... he was in Pleasantville and Almost Blue. He must have just given up. He must have just quit acting. Oh well, fair enough. Full House and Harry and the Hendersons. And then he went on to do camera and electrical work, photography. Well, good acting in this. Fair play to him. Hey, Eddie the Beast. Eddie is in the chat. Hello, I managed to finally get Twitch. Nice one, dude. Thank you for joining the stream. So we're talking about the Phantasm series, and we're on to Phantasm 3, but we're going to move now on to the penultimate release in the series. And this is the only one that I didn't re-watch or first-time watch in the last week. And that's Phantasm 4 Oblivion. So, prior to Phantasm 5 being released, there was a home DVD release of all the Phantasm films in a sphere, like you can see on the screen now. It didn't have the drill, but it had the two prongs on it. And I used to have that somewhere with the four, at the time, Phantasm films. I don't know where that's gone since I moved, and I'm not too fussed about that, because whilst it looked cool, it was a flipping pain in the ass to display, because I had way too many films and not enough space. Probably still the case now. I think that's always going to be a case with me. Too many films, not enough space. I've certainly condensed down quite a lot over the years. At one point, I did have a wall of films and TV series and DVDs and VHS as well. Over the years, I recycled that through, CEX or eBay. But then I build it up just because I like collecting. But yes, the disc, it had a little stand. I lost this little stand very early on. And that sphere would always roll around the place. The lid would come off. The discs would fall out. They probably got scratched up to shit. Either way. And that's where I first saw the Phantasm films, because I think I saw the box set, the Sphere set, I should say, on Amazon. It was like $12.99 for 4 films on DVD. Yes. But Phantasm 4, I remember watching at the time and finding it really boring. It certainly seemed like the budget had been cut massively. The shame here is that the story is elaborated on a lot more. We do actually find out in Phantasm 4, the last film in the series to be written, produced, and directed by Don Coscarelli, as well. We do find out the origin of the Tall Man. The Tall Man was a mortician who ended up doing experimentations for traveling through. Can't exactly remember why he started the experimentation, but essentially he used these these tuning prongs, these 2 things to create a doorway, which led him through to that red planet, that hellscape. Oh, Eddie the Beast in the chat. Just imagine him standing behind you. I'd be like, I'm out of here, man. Oh, Christ. Was that either the Tall Man or the creepy sort of mutated chap? Either way, no thank you. But yeah, Eddie, I'm assuming you're Eddie Hickey, not Eddie Hall. Welcome, dude. Oh yeah, probably that guy there. But we do find out some more information in regards to Jebediah Morningstar, I believe this is Morningside, sorry, is the Tall Man's Earth name, before he went through this doorway that he'd created and then came back something else, came back different, came back with these spheres. A lot of the film is set in the desert, and to me that just instantly makes me think of my filmmaking time in the late 2000s, 2010s, where we do a lot of filming in the forest because you don't need to worry about booking a location, spending money and stuff, because your location is free. It made me think of that. There's interesting elements in it, but maybe I do need to rewatch Phantasm 4 Oblivion. But I just didn't give it the rewatch because I remembered when I saw it the first time, I just thought, man, this is a drop down in quality from the first 3 films. It just came across quite boring, unfortunately, and that's a shame. I probably do need to give it a rewatch. But this, like I say, this does give us a lot more backstory, and essentially it's Mike is trying to be followed by Reggie, trying to find out what the Tall Man wants with him. And that's kind of it from memory. I may well be pissing off Phantasm fans who love the 4th film. So that's on me. I'd probably do need to give it a rewatch, but no, yeah. Canadian filmmaker Roger Avery wrote the screenplay. Oh yeah, we discussed that. Oblivion's budget was considerably lower than the previous 2 films. While Phantasm 2 had a budget of $3 million, Phantasm 3 Lord of the Dead had a budget of $2.5 million, the filmmakers were only able to secure $650,000 to make Phantasm 4 Oblivion. The filmmakers had to be inventive with the budget, much like the first film, which only had a $300,000 budget. For the Civil War dream sequence, a Civil War reenactment group was hired in exchange for a $200 donation. Because the production could afford to build only a few sets, several key scenes were filmed in the desert, making this the only Phantasm movie without significant scenes inside a mausoleum setting, except the very beginning and towards the end. The swarm of spheres that was done by several fans of Phantasm, who then showed it to Bannister, who in turn showed it to Coscarelli. KNBEFX Group also helped out a bit of the film as a favour to Coscarelli. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. That makes sense. You can tell that the money has dropped here. Which leads us on to the final entry in the series. Phantasm Ravager. Ravager. Don't know. Phantasm 5. So I didn't watch this when it got released in 2016. I'd heard very, very, very mixed to low things about this. Looking at the trivia for this on Prime, it did originally start off as a series of short films for a web series. That was the original plan for a little, a series of shorts focusing on the adventures of Reggie. And do you know what? When I saw that on the trivia, which I don't normally look up the trivia on Prime, but I had this on my iPad and I just sort of clicked on it. But I'll give it a read. And it makes sense because, excuse me, by about the 30-minute point in the film, it did feel to me like this film had two directors. Because the opening scenes and the scenes in the desert and the scenes with Reggie's like adventures where he's meeting up and he's shacking up with a curvy girl and looking to try and get lucky, even though she's young enough to be his granddaughter. They just look so cheaply shot. Like the shakiness of the camera angles. There's a moment, speaking of the camera work, in the film's mid-credits scene. It's the only film in the series to have a mid-credits scene. There's a moment where two key characters, one of them returning for the first time since the third film, walk off to this car to join the others who are in this car. And as they're walking off, the camera follows them, and then it does this awkward juddery sort. It does like a kind of, if you're watching this live, if you're not, I'm just doing a hand movement for the camera pan. It's doing a pan where it's following the characters, and then it just suddenly goes like they've knocked the arm of the tripod. And you would just think, surely the director or the DOP would say, "Can we just do that again? Like, make it smoother." It's such a simple little thing, and I'm no expert. I made a film, or worked on a couple of films, but you would just think, let's take that shot again. And because I know, I would, when I then come to the editing of a film, I would look at it and go, oh, fucking hell, I wish I'd done another take of that. You'd always want to take a couple of takes, ideally, but especially that's quite a noticeable little judder, or cut, to another scene before that little judder. Don't know. Little niggly thing there that annoyed me. But we have those moments with the adventures of Reggie in the first, at various points in the first 45, 50 minutes of the film, that just look kind of cheap and tacky. But it's Reggie, it's still got the heart and whatnot. But you've got those moments that look quite cheap with these CGI spheres. And there's a lot more emphasis on the spheres. Almost like you can tell that there's going to be a limited degree of Angus Scrimm in this film. Bear in mind, Angus Scrimm was, I think, 89 or 90 at this point, and he did have, I believe, prostate cancer, or he passed before the film was released theatrically, due to a battle with prostate cancer at the age of 89, which is obviously a shame, but 89 is very good innings. Eddie the Beast in the chat. I'm going to ask, is Lawrence still on Twitch? Because it looks like his last stream was 3 years ago to me. Lawrence streams as Voodoo Gamer. He hasn't streamed, to my knowledge, in a few months. He has been very busy on the road with Don't Stop Believing. But he has done some streams this year, I believe. But yeah, quite a few months ago. So search for Voodoo_Gamer, I believe. Give him a follow if you haven't already, just so you get the latest notifications when he goes live. But then we get these moments with Reggie where we're again toying with this idea of don't believe what you think is happening or has happened is what is really happening. And Reggie's met by a aged looking, I mean, obviously it's going to, his first film as a teenager was 1979, but an aged looking Mike, played by A. Michael Baldwin, who has met Reggie at what looks to be potentially a hospice or a home. He was found wandering around the desert, rambling about the tall man and chasing after Mike. And Mike says to him, "Look, you've been a rock for me. You've been there for me when Jody died in a car crash. But something's not right now. This is a good place for you. They're going to take care of you." And we have these moments where he is in bed in what looks to be a dark hospital, and the person in the bed next to him appears to be the tall man, who is like, "Oh, hello there. Do I know you?" And just seems to be a jovial older chap. These moments are then interspersed with, it's kind of like parallel worlds, and I guess the story, someone can correct me if they paid a little bit more attention or if they've read into it a bit more. There seems to be this parallel story between the events of Reggie on his adventures and Reggie in this hospital and being told that, you're telling me this story, that's great, but that's not actually happening. It then takes a real turn, and it becomes so much more entertaining. You have to look past the effects because they've gone very ambitious, but you can tell it's ambitious with a small budget, and they're doing the best with what they've got available. As you can see on screen, there's a giant sphere shooting a laser through a tall high-rise building. We see a battle in a hellscape where there's like an army of freedom fighters, of which a different version of Mike is one, along with Jody. We also meet Rocky from in the post-credit scene from the third Phantasm film. So it was quite possible for me to write this film off in the first half hour or so. Initially, I was thinking, oh man, this is kind of rough. Like, I knew that it's a different director. They didn't have really any budget. And then when I saw that this was originally going to be short films that they're cobbling together into a feature, my expectations were quite low. But the moments in the hospital when Reggie's being spoken to and dying eventually are all shot very professionally, very well. And when you have the moments where these doctors are going to try and sedate him because he's wandering around talking what appears to be nonsense, and then Reggie sees this doorway open up to the hellscape world that's been ravaged with fighting all the gas masked men, who I think a gas masked man appears in the second or third film as one of the villains, potentially the second film. This doorway opens up, and he then sees the doctors come to him aren't doctors, but they are gas masked men, and he goes to attack them because now he's got his trusty shotgun, and he gets an Uzi as well. And you can ask the question of, has this all been in Reggie's head this entire time? And his delusions are making him think that Mike is there to help save his friend and get them back on the road and bring him back to his unity because he's been alone in the desert for so long, and maybe this has all been a delusion since losing his family and whatnot. Or is this a case of there are parallel worlds, maybe a Phantasm multiverse, as much as I'm kind of sick of the multiverse when it comes to MCU and stuff. It's interesting. And again, normally when it comes to things being, it's all in their head, if it's like a psychological thriller where the twist is it's all in their head, I think, fuck off. I don't like that. It just undermines things in my idea, in my preference. I'm not a fan of that. But with this, it's done in quite a unique way that it makes it an interesting question that's being posed. Because there's a moment when Mike gets into the car, he gets into this car that Jodie's driving. Jodie, obviously time's passed and time hasn't been that kind to him. Bear in mind, he's meant to have died in 1979. He's since gained a lot of weight and lost his hair and whatnot. I mean, this happens in real life, but this is meant to be a guy that surely would stay looking exactly the same at the point they died. Who knows? I don't know. I don't know how aging works in the afterlife. But he appears to save Jodie and Mike in this souped-up car, which has got machine guns on the side, something out of twisted metal. And when Reggie gets into the back of the car, and this is some pretty good acting, he has a moment where he kind of sits and goes like, he has kind of like a hitched breath, and it could be that he's just getting a bit emotional because, he's back with his friends. This is what he's been missing, that need for camaraderie and family and all that stuff, and that's something which we can relate to. But he has this moment where he has that hitched breath, and then there's a moment where he kind of looks like, is he going to have a heart attack? Maybe, I'm not sure. And it cuts to this parallel world, or maybe the real world, and he's lying in a bed with both a live Jodie and Mike next to him on life support, and the life support starts to flatline, and it then cuts to him back in the car, and it's looking like, well, is this his version of heaven, being on the road and fighting evil with his friends? It's hard to say. I mean, maybe that's the way of ending the franchise, and it's leaving it up in the air as to that constant question of what is reality. Is what you saw happening what actually happened? Or are your memories being tricked around with by supernatural machinations? I quite like it. I quite like that. I didn't think I necessarily would, and I certainly had a better time, albeit it does have its flaws. Certainly does. And I think that they could have, maybe if they had the money, shoot differently the short film type segments, because those moments, like the camera work on them, is very, when you hear that there were originally intentions for parts of this, or this originally to be a short film or series of short films, it's very apparent when you then trace it back to some of those earlier scenes, which is a shame. Eddie in the chat, it's probably how there will never be another film of this. Yeah, it certainly seems to be the way that that they have ended things. I mean, the Tall Man, no one can replace Angus Scrimm, really. He has in real life passed away. But that's probably a good way to kind of try and end the series, because Reggie has almost become the de facto lead. As I said, it's certainly one worth watching. I would just say, don't be put off by the CGI and the shonky camera work in the first few scenes, in the first 20 minutes or so. Vix in the chat, what's the really freaky noise? It's scaring the dogs. What noise? Can anyone in the chat let me know if there's a freaky noise coming through on the audio? I do have a fan on, but it's not directed at the microphone. And my levels are just showing my voice. Oh, Vix. I think... Have you... maybe there's a... maybe there's a skinwalker in the house. I've watched a lot of Instagram reels of, if you see another person that looks exactly like you, don't let them in the house. Or if you ever looked at skinwalkers, my dad randomly watches Skinwalker Ranch, and skinwalkers try to look like people, or will scream in forests at night to try and lure you to them. But could you please describe in the chat what is the sound you're hearing? Because there's no sound on the stream. Whoops. Gonna be tears before bedtime. Oh, dearie me. Right, guys. Well, that is it for another edition. So I'm just trying to bring in some music. That is it for another edition of the Ministry of Horror. If you are watching live on twitch.tv/Tezia, stick around. We may do a watch party. It's really going to depend on if we can find a film which looks semi-decent. I can hear a noise. It's not there when I pause. It's like a tapping noise. Don't know, maybe it's your audio settings, Vix, on your TV, or whatever device you're watching it on. If anyone else has heard a tapping noise, it may be me moving the microphone around. Don't know. I can't help you there, love. Sorry. I don't know what is coming through. But yes, we may well do a watch party. Really depends on if we can find something decent and not too long on Amazon Prime. Because if you have your Prime account, if you have Amazon Prime, if you have it linked with with your Twitch account, you'll be able to watch a film with us if the film is available in your area. It's watch parties. We do it most Fridays if I'm here or if I don't have plans with m'lady. So thank you very much for sticking around. The next show will be in 2 weeks' time on Friday, and I believe we will take a look at the Omen film franchise. We may touch on the TV series. I've not seen Damien. I doubt I'll have time to watch an entire season of a show, but I will have to give a shout out. I'm about halfway through season 2 of Them on Sky. Season 1 came out about a year ago. It's from the makers of Lost, or the producers of Lost. It's a great little horror series set in a town that once you enter, after being diverted by a tree stuck across a road, once you enter this town, there is no leaving the town. And after dark, these creatures come out that look like people that will torture and tear you apart unless you are hidden away or unless you're in a building with this rock that's got a symbol on it. Very mysterious. Hopefully it's not a show that just adds mystery and provides no good answers. Who knows? We'll have to find out. But that is it. If you are going to watch the watch party, stick around. If not, I will stop the recording shortly. But thank you for watching. Be sure to follow the channel on twitch.tv/Tesius. Give us a subscribe. If you have Prime, you can use your Prime subscription. It won't cost you a penny. It just takes it out of Amazon's money. Or if you want to give some bunts, that's perfectly fine, but no big deal. And if you listen to it on audio platforms such as Spotify or Apple Podcasts, be sure to give a follow or a little subscribe or review, whatever. It helps, apparently. I don't know. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Stick around, but for the purposes of the audio, goodbye.